didn't expect the will to feel like a ledger. Numbers next to names, a clean line where my mother's should have been, and then the strange weight of my grandmother's handwriting in the margins, the loops and slashes that used to sign birthday cards and permission slips. I was the one who sat with her at the end. I changed sheets, argued with the hospice nurse about pain meds, learned the angles of the bed so her hips wouldn't bruise. When she slept, I paid her bills on my laptop at the little table by the window, tracking every utility and copay like a junior bookkeeper. It wasn't glamorous. None of it was, but it made sense to me in the way that fire scenes make sense at 3 in the morning, when the radio is spitting addresses and cross streets, and your body switches into that other gear. I've never said it out loud because it sounds like I'm trying to win points, but yes, I earned what she left me. And still, when my mother said her friends thought it was horrible that she was cut out, I heard the old child version of me stand up at attention. She said she wasn't asking. She said she wasn't expecting anything, but if we offered, she wouldn't say no. I told her I knew. She said that meant I understood. I said it meant I heard her. I live small on purpose. I rent a 1-bedroom that faces a brick wall and a skinny slice of sky. The sun finds it for an hour in the morning and then forgets. I buy my coffee beans on sale, cook in batches, run my boots until the soles go slick and a captain finally gives me the look. I've been to too many apartments where the ceilings are furred with smoke and the couch is the color of yesterday and somebody keeps saying, I thought the batteries were new, to sell myself on nicer things. The inheritance didn't change that. It padded the account I call later, the one I peek at on nights when the sirens feel too loud in my bones, and the idea of doing this at 55 makes me dizzy. Early retirement is a fantasy I flirt with because it's cheaper than therapy. My mother calls it fear and a lack of imagination. She says she retired early and never looked back. She didn't mention the part where early was 15 years and funded by 2 adults who never missed a mortgage payment and a market run that lifted even the boats with holes in them. She said that wasn't the point. I said it changed the math. She brought up the floors like she was talking about groceries. She said the carpet felt sad, and she couldn't live with sad, so she put in a $15,000 oak with a matte finish that shows every footprint like a crime scene. She said she deserved a place that made her want to wake up in the morning. I told her I was happy for her. She said happiness wasn't the point, family was. She said family means not letting your mother struggle when you've just been handed a cushion. I told her the cushion wasn't a toy. It was the space between me and a bad fall. She said I was dramatic. I said I was practical. She said practicality looks a lot like stinginess when you're talking about blood. And I felt that old reflex I hate, inventorying my blessings out loud like a petitioner who has to prove she's unworthy of help because she has too much already. Yes, I have a job. Yes, I make decent money. Yes, my parents helped with school. Yes, I am not drowning. None of those sentences answer the question I can't get past. If you didn't speak to her for 20 years, why am I paying for the story you told about her absence? When I think about children, the thoughts arrive like weather, sudden, specific, gone. I see a high chair in the corner where my drying rack stands, a plastic bowl abandoned on the floor, a tiny sock that somehow made it into the freezer because my brain is a drawer where nothing matches anymore. I see a crib in a room that doesn't exist yet because there isn't a room. I tell myself I could make it work if I had to. I tell myself people make it work every day with less. I crawl into burning kitchens and peer under blackened cabinets for the little hiss and flicker the rookies miss. Surely I can figure out daycare wait lists and rent hikes. Then the siren starts again in my chest, and I remember the ladder tip while the wind shoved us and the face of the guy in the 3rd-floor hallway who didn't look scared, just resigned. I told my mother I don't know yet about kids. She said I was running out of runway. I told her I'd rather be honest than build a life I can't carry. She said fear again, that word she likes to pin on me like a name tag. I said boundaries. She said cold. The first time she mentioned her friends, I thought it was an accident. She said, well, Brenda couldn't believe it, and then pretended to fumble for her glasses like she hadn't meant to say Brenda's name at all. Brenda believes a lot of things loudly. Brenda believes the city is dying because the bakery closed. Brenda believes you can't get a decent man anymore because women forgot how to make pot roast. Brenda believes my grandmother was unkind to my mother, and that unkindness should not follow a woman to her grave. I told my mother I didn't care what Brenda believed. She said I should, because Brenda knows everyone and people talk. I told her I'm not running for office. She said reputations still matter. I told her mine is built on showing up when the tones drop and not letting people die. She said that was melodramatic. I said that was my job description. She said she didn't like it when I used my job like a shield. I told her I didn't like it when she used her friends like a weapon. My brother lives 3 time zones away and conducts his guilt like an orchestra. He said he wished he could do more and then listed the reasons he couldn't. The mortgage, the preschool that cost as much as a studio apartment, the job that expects him to check his email on Sundays like it's a hobby. He said Mom had asked him, too. He said he told her he needed to think. I told him thinking was how we end up doing the thing we didn't want to do, slowly, politely, until it's done. He said he didn't want to be the bad guy. I told him we were going to be the bad guys no matter what, because the story had already been written. In the story, Mom was the woman cut out by a cruel old lady, and we were the children who could fix that with one generous gesture. In the story, the part where Grandma kept a meticulous log of unanswered calls and unopened birthday cards doesn't make the final edit. He said I was harsh. I said I was tired. He said he knew. He said he was grateful I handled the hospital and the hospice and the funeral home with the carpet that smelled like old pennies. He said he'd send me money for the plane ticket I refused to submit. I told him to keep it. He said that wasn't fair. I told him I wasn't trying to be fair. I was trying to be done. She asked to come over, to see how I'm doing, which is my mother's way of deciding what should change in my home and then nomming it care. She said she missed me and the city and the way the air smells near the water. I told her to pick a time when I wasn't sleeping off a night tour. She said nights are for young people. I said nights are for the working class and the unlucky and everyone waiting for a phone that won't ring. She said Thursday at 2. I said fine. I cleaned because I'm ridiculous, because I wanted her to see that I was fine without any additions, because some adolescent part of me still believes you can scrub yourself into being understood. She stood in the doorway and said the place was smaller than she imagined. She said it was cozy, which is a word she uses when she means insufficient. She touched the spine of a book like it might stain her finger. She said, I'm not here to fight, which is the sentence that means a fight is already underway. I made tea. She didn't drink it. She told me the renovation budget had run away from her. She said the contractor discovered rot under the old tile, and you can't just leave rot, it spreads. She said the railing on the back steps wasn't a code, and she could be sued if a delivery guy fell. She said the new windows cost more but would pay for themselves with the energy savings. She said this like she'd invented the concept of a kilowatt hour. She said none of this would be a problem if Grandma had been fair. I told her fairness wasn't a math problem you solve by moving decimal points between checking accounts. She said that was exactly what money is for, to correct the parts of life that come out wrong. I told her I would not be correcting the past with a check. She said I was being cruel. I told her I had been careful not to use that word with her. She said careful doesn't mean kind. I told her kind doesn't mean open wallet. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. I told her she was finally seeing me. She tried a softer angle then, the one that lands like a hand on your hair. She said she knew I was scared. She said I could give a little and see how it felt, and if it felt bad, we could stop. She said a few thousand wouldn't change my life. Not really, but it would change hers. She said she wanted to sleep without thinking about invoices. I told her I sleep with the smell of melting plastic in my nose, and money does not fix that. She said I always bring it back to drama. I said it's not drama if it happened. She said, what would Grandma want? And I felt my teeth meet hard enough I worried one would crack. I told her Grandma wrote down what she wanted. She said wills can be wrong. I told her they can, but this one is. She said she wished I could be generous. I told her I wished she could be honest just once about the 20 years she didn't call. She said she didn't like being judged. I said neither did I. She stood, which is how she ends things, by changing altitude. She said she had another appointment. She said she thought we could be reasonable. She said her friends would be disappointed in me, not that I care what they think, but still. She said she didn't want this to get ugly. I asked what ugly meant. She said she didn't know. People talk, lawyers talk. It's a shame when private matters become public. I asked if she was threatening me. She said she would never. She said she was warning me that narratives have a way of escaping their cages. I told her I was done being polite about cages. She said she would call me next week when I'd had time to cool off. I told her not to. At night at the station, the tones were mercifully quiet for a few hours, and the kitchen smelled like onions and cheap curry powder, and the rookies were arguing about whether you could fix a relationship by moving to a new city. I washed my mug and checked my phone and found a voicemail from the attorney who handled the estate. He said my mother had reached out with questions about reallocation. He said he wasn't sure what that meant legally, but he wanted to give me a heads up. He said she asked for a meeting. He said she sounded calm. Calm is a word that means prepared. I stood by the sink and felt the floor tilt like we were taking a ladder hit from the wind. My mother said she didn't want things to get ugly. My mother set a date with the man who knows where the lines are drawn. I told myself I wouldn't pick up if she called again. She didn't. She texted instead. I told him you'd be there. Family solves family problems. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred, and then I typed back the shortest sentence I could live with. No, she read it. She didn't reply. Somewhere between my shift change and sunrise, she posted a smiling photo with Brenda at the new floors, captioned, "Doing the right thing feels good." I didn't like it. I didn't comment. I went upstairs when the tones dropped and the world went loud. And on the stairs, I realized something I should have known already. My mother had decided what the right thing was, and she'd decided I had agreed. I could feel the story hardening under me like concrete. The good daughter corrects the old wrong by peeling a slice of her future off and handing it to her mother with grace. The selfish daughter hoards. The good mother is humbled by the gift. The cruel mother is invented by daughters who misremember. The town tuts and nods and moves on to the next porch. I told myself I wouldn't stand inside that story and pretend it was mine. I told myself I would not let a meeting happen because someone else put my name on a calendar. I told myself I would put this in my own language, even if it made me the bad guy in a group chat I'll never see. And still, when the attorney's assistant emailed with a calendar invite I hadn't accepted, the subject line read, "Reallocation discussion. Family resolution." I closed the laptop like it could bite me. I said out loud to an empty room that I wasn't going. I said it again, because sometimes you have to hear yourself commit. The next morning before shift, there was an envelope under my door, hand-delivered, my name written in my mother's careful schoolteacher cursive. Inside was a single page, a family loan template printed off the internet with blanks for interest and term and collateral, half filled in with my initials where hers should be. She had written in the amount in the box at the top like it was a score, 50,000. She said, in a neat note at the bottom, that she'd already told a few people I was stepping up. She said it would be humiliating to correct that now. She said she knew I wouldn't put her in that position. I held the paper up to the window like sunlight could burn the ink off. 50,000 in my mother's tidy numerals, a number that looks round and polite until you translate it into years of rent, or the time between now and a fall that breaks something softer than bone. She'd filled in the interest as family rate, which is not a percentage so much as a leash. She'd left collateral blank because the collateral was me. I could hear her voice even without calling. She would say it wasn't a demand, it was a bridge. She would say I was free to decline, and then list the names of people who already knew I'd said yes. She would say she hated to involve outsiders, and then mention Brenda and the attorney twice in one breath. I slid the template back into the envelope and put it in the freezer under a bag of peas, because absurdity is sometimes the only way to keep your hands from shaking. I told myself I'd throw it away later. I told myself later was when I had a better answer than anger. At the station, the captain's board rattled when the bay door came down, and the rookies scattered for their checks like someone was keeping score. I moved through it on muscle memory, the inventory, the radios, the little rituals that make the chaos manageable, while my brain ran its private drill. I said out loud to no one that the meeting would happen without me. I said I wouldn't defend myself to a room that treated my life like a whiteboard. I said my grandmother had written what she wanted, and we were not going to turn her last clear sentence into a negotiation, because my mother could write cleaner numbers. I said it until the tones hit. It was a walk-up with a stairwell like a throat. Smoke hung thick on the second landing. Someone had left a stroller abandoned against the rail as if it could climb by itself. 2 doors down, a woman was pounding on the wood and screaming a name that wasn't registering as language yet. My partner shouldered past. I took the irons. The muscle memory took the rest. This is the part that feels like prayer to me, the hinge moment where the world is noisy, and then suddenly it isn't because your body has decided. I told the woman to back up. I told the door to give. It did. We found a kitchen that had forgotten what off meant, a pan that was trying to become coal, a battery that had died someplace high and silent. We killed the flame and breathed through the gloves and told jokes on the stairs after, the mean gallows kind that makes civilians flinch. I laughed too loud and felt my lungs complain. When the woman tried to hug me, she said, "God bless." And I thought about my mother telling me generosity is a religion, and I wondered which God she had in mind. I skipped the reallocation meeting and sent the attorney a sentence that tasted like steel. All estate matters are settled. I will not entertain revisions or loans. Please cease scheduling on my behalf. He replied with the kind of bland professionalism you can use as a mirror, said he'd inform interested parties, and closed the file. An hour later, my mother texted an ellipsis, and then nothing, which is how she tells you she's wounded without giving you a wound to point at. By evening, a cousin I haven't seen in 3 years sent a sad face emoji and the words, "Wow, really?" I didn't answer. By midnight, my brother forwarded a message from Mom with no comment, as if silence made him neutral. She had written that she was disappointed in the tone of my email and concerned about my rigidity. I told my brother I'm not flexible when the request is to bend around a missing spine. He said I didn't have to be cruel. I said I was. He said Mom was crying. I said I wasn't the one who set the calendar invite without asking. The envelope in my freezer didn't stop existing, and neither did the feeling that I was walking across a thin piece of glass above a story my mother was writing under me. When she finally finally called, she started with the voice she used when I had the flu in 3rd grade. She said she was worried about me. She said I was isolating. She said money had made me cold. I told her I was busy and fine. She said she had already told people I'm helping, that she felt foolish now. I told her I didn't make that choice for her. She said she thought I'd love her enough to save her from embarrassment. I told her love is not a PR firm. She said I was being unkind on purpose. I said I was being clear on purpose. She tried a new door, she said. What if it's not a gift? What if it's a short-term hold? I need to get through the contractor phase. After the refinance, I can make you whole. I told her there was no phase of my life that included being my mother's bridge loan. She said I made her sound like a stranger. I told her strangers don't feel entitled to your future. She went quiet long enough for me to hear the shape of the next thing. She said, "Your grandmother would hate this." I told her grandma gave me the exact language to use, in ink with witnesses. She said wills are paper and family is blood. I said blood has been used to excuse a lot of theft. She said, very softly, that she didn't raise me to talk to her like this. I didn't say the sentence that lives in my mouth like a match. You didn't raise me for 20 years to talk to her at all. I told her I had to go. She said we weren't finished. I said I was. I hung up and felt the flat ache that follows any boundary, the place where the habit used to be. The next day, the story went public in the small way small towns do public. A Facebook post with a vague caption about respecting the dead while caring for the living. A photo of my mother's new floor with sunlight making the grain look like water. A comment thread that bloomed like mold. I didn't see it right away. A colleague sent a screenshot with a "you okay?" and 3 fire emojis because everyone thinks they're funny when they text a firefighter. The comments weren't about me by name, but the ones who knew. There were people who swore they would never cut a mother out, people who talked about forgiveness like it was free. There was one woman who wrote a novel about how her daughter was ungrateful and the Lord sees, and then 6 replies from cousins about casseroles. I closed the app and put my phone in a drawer because I am not obligated to stand in a digital town square, while people who wouldn't give you an inch in a checkout line judge your soul like they have a gavel. When the tones hit again, it was for something smaller, a false alarm, burnt toast in a building that can't afford to pay for an alarm company that answers the first ring. On the way back, we stopped for gas, and a guy in a suit yelled at his steering wheel like the wheel had betrayed him. I watched his mouth shape words I couldn't hear and thought about how anger always wants an audience. I wondered if mine did too. I told myself I was allowed to feel it privately and still not send it out like a press release. Back at the station, the captain handed out the weekend schedule like a judge handing sentences. I pulled a Sunday 24 and a Tuesday 16 and told myself I liked the rhythm of exhaustion better than the rhythm of checking my phone. My brother called late with the voice he saves for when he wants me to be the adult so he doesn't have to. He said Mom had floated another idea, interim stewardship, she called it, where I would hold some funds for family emergencies and dispense compassion as needed. He said it sounded reasonable. I told him it sounded like being promoted to vault with no lock. He said he didn't think she meant it like that. I told him the thing I keep relearning. Intent doesn't change impact. He said I was going to break her heart. I said her heart wasn't my job. He said he envied my certainty. I said I practice it in the mirror. He laughed a little because he knows I'm only half joking. When my mother finally moved from implication to instruction, it arrived as a list. Dates for a family budget summit, estimates from the contractor, interest tables printed from some calculator site, 2 hand-drawn charts that made the numbers look like weather maps. She wrote transparency at the top of one in green marker, the way teachers do when they think color will rescue content. I sat at my kitchen table and sorted the pages into stacks I labeled with sticky notes. Fantasy, threat, accounting, theater. I kept one page, the contractor's change order for the floors, because it was the only line item that looked like a truth with a receipt. 15,000 because carpet felt sad. I circled it with a pen until the circle looked like a bruise. When she texted to ask if I'd reviewed the packet, I said I had. She said, and I said no. She said the contractor was expecting a deposit by Friday. I said I wasn't the contractor. She said she didn't know who I'd become. I said, finally, the sentence I'd held back like a breath. The person who stopped paying for your choices. She didn't respond. 30 minutes later, Brenda posted a quote about daughters who forget who nursed them, and I laughed out loud alone in my kitchen because weaponized poetry always forgets to rhyme. I kept waiting for the other shoe, the legal letter, the public shamming with my name in it, the cousin who goes live for 15 minutes of vigilante nuance. What I got was quieter and worse. My mother started calling my father we, as in, we're worried about you, and we can't believe you'd let strangers decide our family's fate. He texted a photo of a handyman estimate for a railing as if that would make me say yes to a new religion. He said he didn't want tension. I told him tension isn't a weather pattern, it's a consequence. He said he'd never thought of me as unkind. I told him he'd never thought of me much when it was inconvenient. He sent a thumbs up, the digital equivalent of a door closing without a latch. I thought maybe the pressure would slacken if I gave the money a shape in my head. What 50,000 buys in a life like mine? It buys years of not doing back-to-back nights when my knees ask for mercy. It buys the difference between a studio and a second room if I decide to try the future with a crib in it. It buys a cushion between me and the kind of call that leaves you quiet for a month because the hallway filled with brown smoke and someone yelled a name that sounded like yours. It buys time. It is time, shaved off the grind and put in a jar. My mother called it a cushion like a throw pillow, something pretty you toss on a couch to impress Brenda. I called it later, and later is the only word I have that keeps me from feeling like I'm running in place. Night before the contractor's deposit was due, my mother left a voicemail where she cried without sound. She said she didn't want to beg. She said she didn't know how we got here. She said she loved me, the way someone says a password at a door. She said she was ashamed she had to ask. She said she was ashamed of me for making her. I listened to it twice and then deleted it because I'm not a museum for weaponized memory. I put my phone face down and cleaned my stove like it had said something cruel. At midnight, my pager chirped for a mutual aid call across town. And I blessed the timing because fire is the only conversation I have where no one expects me to apologize for showing up as myself. When I got home, there was a thin white envelope slid under my door, the kind attorneys like because it looks harmless. The return address wasn't my mother. It was her new phrase made flesh. Inside was a letter on polite paper requesting informal mediation to discuss equitable redistribution, a phrase so bland it made my teeth itch. At the bottom, a note in my mother's handwriting, almost an afterthought. If you don't come, I will ask the court to compel financial disclosure. The way some people say I love you, my mother says I will escalate. I stood there with the letter in my hand and felt the solidity of the boundary I'd built, the way it held even when she pushed with new tools. I didn't know yet what her compel meant, whether it was smoke or spark. I only knew the next thing I would do. I opened my freezer, took out the envelope with the loan template, and fed both pieces of paper through my shredder until the bin was confetti. Then I sat down at my table and wrote a statement I could live inside without hatting myself. One sentence I would send to the attorney, to my brother, to anyone who tried to act as a conduit for my mother's wants. The estate stands as written. I will not fund renovations, refinance risks, or family optics. Any further contact about money will be routed through my counsel. I read it twice, felt the old reflex. Apologize, soften, promise a maybe later, rise and fade. I hit send, turned off my phone, and finally slept. In the morning, someone knocked. Not a neighbor's polite tap, a steady, practiced rhythm that said patience with a badge. I checked the peephole and saw an unfamiliar man with a notebook and a business card held up like a white flag. He looked like the kind of person who introduces himself with a last name and a title and asks questions that pretend to be friendly. He smiled at the peephole as if he could see me. "Morning," he said to the wood. "I'm here about a family matter." The man at my door introduced himself as Mr. Keller, financial mediator. His tone was polite, but his eyes already knew too much. He said my mother and Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, that was my parents' legal unit, had asked him to facilitate dialogue regarding family inheritance concerns. I told him there was no dialogue left to facilitate. He smiled in that practiced way people do when they've been told not to take no for an answer. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "Just to explore amicable options before this becomes," how did she phrase it? "Unpleasantly formal." She already made it unpleasantly formal, I said. "You're standing at my door." He looked over my shoulder into the apartment like he was taking inventory of what success looked like. Then he handed me a folder. "They'd like you to review some documents before you decide whether to attend mediation," he said. "I'm obligated to inform you that declining to participate might lead to a petition for financial review." The word petition hung between us like static. I took the folder just to end the conversation. He thanked me, said he admired independent women who stand their ground, and left. That last part was what men say when they want to sound respectful, but also remind you they could make this harder. I didn't open the folder until night. Inside were printouts of my bank transfers from the estate account, highlighted in yellow, and an affidavit template claiming misappropriation of family assets. My mother had signed nothing yet, but the blanks were there, waiting. The message was clear: cooperate or she would accuse. I sat at the table, staring at the highlighted lines, trying to decide if shock still counted as surprise when you saw it coming. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my brother. "She's serious, you know. Just talk to her once. I'll be there." I typed no and erased it. Typed again, stop helping her weaponize guilt, and erased that too. Finally, I wrote, if she files, I'll respond through counsel. Don't call me again about this. He replied with a single word, wow. The next morning at the station, the coffee tasted like metal. The captain cracked a joke about family drama after overhearing me on the phone with the attorney. I forced a laugh, because explaining any of it out loud would make it sound like fiction. A mother threatening to sue her daughter for following a legal will. People don't believe that story unless they've lived in families like mine. By evening, Keller had left a voicemail. Your mother would prefer to resolve this privately. If you could provide a small goodwill gesture, say $10,000, it might de-escalate things. $10,000, like it was a parking ticket. I called my lawyer, a woman named Darcy who'd spent 2 decades diffusing family financial bombs. She listened, then sighed. If she's bluffing, ignore it. If she's not, we file a preemptive injunction preventing any asset claim. Either way, you keep everything in writing. No calls, no private meetings. She wants to humiliate me, I said. She wants to control the narrative, Darcy corrected. Don't give her a stage. I followed orders. Every message, every knock went unanswered or forwarded. Weeks passed. Then one night on shift, I got a call from an unknown number. Against instinct, I answered. Sometimes unknown means emergency. It was her. Don't hang up, she said quickly. Please, I just need you to listen. I didn't hang up. Maybe because the background noise sounded like rain, and for a second I remembered her humming to the radio while driving me to school. She said she'd overreacted, that Keller was a misunderstanding. She said she missed me. Then her tone changed, soft but rehearsed. I'm drowning, sweetheart. The refinance fell through. I could lose the house. You know I've always tried to be strong. I'm asking for a bridge, not a gift. I'll pay you back. I closed my eyes. You threatened to sue me, I said. I was angry. You pushed me. No, I said quietly. You decided anger was easier than accountability. You don't talk to your mother that way. You stopped being just my mother when you became my accuser. There was silence, then a tremor in her breath. You'll regret this someday. Maybe, I said, but I won't regret protecting myself. She hung up. The next week, the story spread farther. An online community update page ran a short piece about a local inheritance dispute dividing a prominent family. They didn't name us, but they didn't need to. Small towns are good at connecting dots. A neighbor left a note in my mailbox that said, sorry for your troubles, praying for reconciliation. I burned it in the sink. When the petition finally arrived by certified mail, I almost laughed. It wasn't even professional, just my mother's signature beneath a statement that I had misinterpreted verbal intentions and failed to allocate resources equitably. Darcy read it, then looked up at me. This won't hold, she said. It's amateur hour. We'll respond formally once and then never again. Will it stop her? I asked. No, but it will remind her that paper cuts both ways. We filed our response, a brick of legal language that ended with a single sentence I liked. The decedent's wishes were executed in full compliance with law. Further contact will be considered harassment. A month of silence followed, so complete it felt rehearsed. Then, on a random Tuesday, a bouquet arrived at the station with no card, just white lilies, funereal. The rookies teased that I had a secret admirer. I threw them out before my shift ended. That night I dreamed of my grandmother again. The hospital bed, the window light, her hand squeezing mine once before she drifted. She'd whispered something then that I hadn't understood until now. Keep your name clean. I used to think she meant morally. Now I think she meant legally. The quiet didn't last. My mother found a new tactic, sympathy campaigns. She started showing up at church charity events, talking about estrangement and misunderstandings. A friend sent me a clip from a local podcast where she was a guest. She spoke about how grief can twist families, about children who mistake boundaries for cruelty. She never said my name, but when she mentioned a daughter in a dangerous line of work who's forgotten compassion, that was enough. Darcy asked if I wanted to send a cease and desist. I said no. Let her talk. Every word made her look smaller. Then, one evening, I came home to find my door slightly ajar. The lock wasn't broken, just unlatched. Inside, nothing looked disturbed, but the air felt wrong, like someone had rearranged molecules. I checked every drawer, every cabinet. In the freezer, the bag of peas that had once hidden her first envelope was gone. The peas were still there, but the envelope wasn't, because I'd shredded it. Whoever came expected to find proof of something. I called Darcy first, then the police. They filed a report, took photos, asked if I suspected anyone. I said yes. They nodded like they'd heard that answer before. When the officer left, I sat on the couch and finally allowed myself to shake. Not because of fear, because of recognition. My mother had crossed from persuasion to intrusion. The line was gone. Darcy's email the next morning was short. We file for a restraining order today. I didn't argue. The courthouse smelled like dust and old paper, the kind that clings to your clothes no matter how long you stay. Darcy walked beside me, brisk and steady, carrying a folder thicker than my arm. "Keep your answers short," she said. "Yes or no, don't explain, don't editorialize." I nodded. The hallway walls were lined with framed photos of judges in black robes and forced smiles, like school portraits for authority. My mother wasn't there, not yet, but I knew she'd come. She couldn't resist a stage. When she finally appeared, it was almost cinematic. A cream blazer, pearls that were grandma, and that faint perfume I used to associate with safety. She looked smaller than I remembered, and for a second, that trick of empathy tried to crawl back into my chest. But then I saw her eyes, dry, sharp, calculating, and the old weight settled where love should have been. The hearing was procedural, quiet, sterile. My lawyer spoke for me, hers spoke for her. Words like harassment, boundary violations, intent to intimidate floated through the room like harmless ghosts. My mother's lawyer tried to spin it into misunderstanding. "She's a worried parent, not a threat," he said. "All she wants is communication." Darcy countered with the security report, the photos, the emails, the voicemail, and finally, the signed petition accusing me of misappropriation. "That's not worry," she said. "That's control." When the judge asked if I had anything to add, I stood. My throat was tight, but my voice didn't shake. "I don't hate my mother," I said. "I just stopped volunteering for damage." The judge didn't react, but Darcy's pen paused for half a second. 10 minutes later, the order was granted. 500 feet of distance. Legally, physically, mercifully. Outside the courthouse, the air felt like something I'd earned. Darcy put a hand on my shoulder. "This doesn't make you cruel," she said. "I know," I replied. "It makes me free." For a few weeks it worked. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was hollow but stable. At night, I cooked just to fill the noise. I'd make lentil soup, watch the steam rise, imagine that somewhere out there, she was telling Brenda I'd overreacted. That was fine. Let her rewrite it. I didn't need to correct her anymore. Truth doesn't need a defense once it's notarized. Then Julia called. My sister's voice was syrup over glass, sweet, but sharp enough to cut. "Hey," she said, casual, like the past 6 months hadn't happened. "Just checking in. How's the big city life?" I didn't answer. She filled the silence like she always did. "Mom told me everything. I can't believe you took it that far. She's devastated." I said nothing. She sighed. "You could have just helped her a little. You had the money, right? It's not like you'd miss it." "Julia," I said quietly, "do not call me again." "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. She's our mother." "She's your mother," I said. "I'm the evidence she had another daughter and forgot how to love her." "Jesus, you're unbelievable," Julia snapped. "You think you're better than us." "No," I said, "just different." Then I hung up. 3 days later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, no postage stamp, just my name in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a photo. Me, leaving my apartment, my keys in hand. Someone had taken it from across the street. No message, no explanation, just proof that she could still reach me. I called Darcy. She told me to save it, not to panic, to install additional cameras. She reminded me that sometimes escalation was a test to see if you'd flinch. I didn't. I filed another report. But fear is a quiet thing. It doesn't knock, it waits. For a while, I found myself checking shadows twice, replaying footsteps in my head. Work became my anchor again. Inside the sirens, at least chaos had rules. One night, after a 20-hour shift, I came home to find the hallway lights flickering. When I reached my door, something was taped to it, a single sheet of paper. It was a quote, printed in large, neat letters. "Blood is thicker than water, but even water can drown you." No signature. I laughed. I don't know why. Maybe exhaustion, maybe madness. The absurdity of it, the theatricality. She wanted me to be scared. Instead, I felt pity. That was the night I decided to move. Not because I was running, but because I deserved stillness. I found a new apartment closer to work, higher floor, stricter security. Darcy handled the paperwork. I didn't even tell my brother. The old place stayed empty for a month before I let go of the lease. The morning I left, I stood in the kitchen one last time. The light hit the counter where she once sat, pretending to love me. I whispered, "You don't live here anymore." Then I locked the door and walked away. For months, nothing. No letters, no sightings, no whispers. I started to think she'd finally exhausted herself or found a new obsession. I began sleeping through the night again, until the call came. A social worker, voice cautious but kind. She said my mother had been admitted to the hospital after collapsing at home. She said my name was listed as emergency contact. I said that wasn't possible. She read the number back to me. My number. My mother had never deleted me from her forms. "She's asking for you," the woman said gently. I stood in silence, the sound of my own breath too loud. Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me was 7 years old again, waiting for a hand that never reached back. I said I'd think about it. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling and replayed every sentence that had led me here. Every time I'd said no, every time she'd called it cruelty. I told myself I owed her nothing, but I also knew this was the final fork in the road. Mercy or distance. In the morning, I packed a bag, not for her, for myself, so that whatever happened in that hospital room, I could walk out clean. The hospital was quieter than I remembered. That sterile kind of silence that smells like disinfectant and unspoken fear. I stood at the entrance for a long time, debating whether to go in. Every rational part of me screamed to turn around. Every tired, human part whispered just end it. The elevator hummed up to the third floor like a held breath. Her room number was 317. The door was open, and there she was, smaller, frailer, tubes in her arm, her once perfect hair flattened against the pillow. For a moment, I saw my mother from 20 years ago, standing at the stove in her old blue robe, humming to herself. Then she opened her eyes, and the illusion cracked. "You came," she said. Her voice was weaker than I'd ever heard it, but the satisfaction in it was still sharp. "I wasn't sure I would," I replied. She smiled faintly. "I knew you would. You're still my daughter. I'm still a person with boundaries," I said. "That hasn't changed." She laughed softly, a dry, papery sound. "You always did have to get the last word." I didn't respond. Her eyes drifted toward the window. "They said it was stress, heart strain. I suppose I've been under a lot." I said nothing. She turned back to me. "I didn't mean for things to go so far. The lawsuit, the letters, all of it. I just felt invisible." That word hit me like a punch. Invisible. The same word I'd used 100 times to describe my childhood. I almost asked her if she understood the irony, but her face looked so worn, so pale, that I swallowed it. "You made choices," I said quietly. "I made mine." Her lips trembled. "Do you really hate me that much?" "I don't hate you," I said. "I just don't trust you." She closed her eyes. "That's worse." "No," I said. "It's safer." She didn't reply. The monitors beeped steadily, the rhythm too calm for how fast my thoughts were running. Then she said, "You know, Julia hasn't visited once. Not once. I thought at least she's not your savior either." I interrupted. Her eyes flickered open, hurt flashing for a moment. "You sound just like your grandmother." I'll take that as a compliment. For a long while, we just sat in silence. There was nothing left to fix, nothing left to burn, just the wreckage between us, finally still. When the nurse came in to check her vitals, my mother looked at me like a question she couldn't ask. I stood. "I'm glad you're getting help," I said, "but I can't be part of this anymore." Her hand twitched on the blanket. "Don't go yet." I already stayed longer than I should have. She looked away. "I was a good mother once, was I?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to give her that mercy. But mercy, I've learned, isn't always kindness. "You were a mother," I said. "That's all I can give you." I left before she could reply. Outside, the sun hit me like punishment. My lungs felt full of smoke that wasn't there. Darcy called later that evening, already knowing where I'd been. "She's not your responsibility," she said gently. "I know," I replied. But part of me needed to see her one last time, to prove to myself she was human. And she was, I said, just not the kind I needed. A few weeks passed before the next call. This time, it wasn't the hospital. It was Julia. Her voice was tight, exhausted. "She's gone," she said. "Heart failure last night." I sat down, not from shock, just from the finality of it. "I thought you should know," Julia added. "They're having the service Saturday." I didn't ask who they were. It didn't matter. "I won't be there," I said. "Seriously, she was your mother." She was also the reason I had to learn what boundaries are. "You're unbelievable," Julia snapped. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but regret isn't the same as guilt." She hung up. The funeral came and went without me. I heard about it later from a neighbor. Small service, white roses, the same pastor who'd once told me God forgives everything if you let him. I wonder if my mother believed that. I didn't. Forgiveness, to me, wasn't an eraser. It was a locked door. After that, the calls stopped. The silence stretched into months. For the first time, I felt what peace actually meant. Not joy, not triumph, just absence of noise. Then, one evening, I got an email from an unknown address. Subject: "Final letter from your mother." It came from the hospital chaplain. Attached was a scan page, handwritten. My mother's looping cursive shaky but still recognizable. "Marina, I know you won't come to the funeral, and maybe that's fair. I did many things I shouldn't have, some I thought were love when they were really control. I told myself I was protecting you from selfishness when I was the selfish one. Maybe you'll never believe that. That's okay. I just want you to know that the money, the will, the arguments, they were never really about any of that. They were about the feeling that I was disappearing from your life, and I didn't know how to stop it. I thought if I could make you need me again, you'd come back. Instead, I pushed you away. I'm sorry I never knew how to love you right. Mom." I read it twice, then 3 times. And for the first time in years, I cried, not because I forgave her, but because she finally told the truth. I printed the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in the same box as Grandma's will and my restraining order papers. The past, neatly documented, a record of survival. That night, I lit a candle by the window and whispered goodbye, not to her, but to the version of myself that still waited for an apology. She'd gotten it, and now she could rest. A week later, I went back to work. At the station, someone joked about me taking mental health leave. I just smiled. They didn't need to know that for once. I'd actually found it. But peace, I've learned, isn't permanent. It's rented, not owned. And just when I started to believe the rent was paid, Julia came back. She showed up at my apartment on a Wednesday afternoon. No warning, no text. Just the sound of knuckles against the door like she still owned the right to enter. For a second, I thought it might be a neighbor or a delivery. Then I heard her voice. "Marina, please, just open up." The name hit differently now. Once, it used to sound like family. Now it sounded like a test. I didn't open. I spoke through the door. "What do you want, Julia?" Her breath hitched. "I just want to talk. I swear I'm not here to fight." "That's what Mom used to say," I replied. "This isn't about her," she said quickly. "It's about me, about Sophia." That name made me pause. I hadn't heard it in months. My niece, 2 years old now, maybe more. A life born into the same mess we were raised in. "What about her?" I asked. There was a long silence. Then quietly, "She doesn't have anyone left." I unlocked the door but left the chain on. Julia stood there in jeans too big for her and a sweatshirt that wasn't hers, tired, brittle, the gloss of arrogance stripped away. Her hair was pulled back like she'd stopped caring what reflections stared back. For the first time in my life, she looked ordinary. "She's sick," Julia said, voice shaking. "Bronchitis. The doctor says it'll pass, but I can't do this alone, Marina." My body tensed. "You have Dad." She laughed bitterly. "He's in a rehab facility now. His heart, it's bad. He barely remembers what day it is. And your friends, Brenda." Her eyes filled with something that wasn't quite tears. "You know how fast people vanish when you stop being entertaining." I didn't answer. Julia pressed her palms together. Desperate. "I know I don't deserve your help. I know what I did. But she's a baby, Marina. She didn't do anything. Please, just meet her once. You don't have to do anything else, just see her." That request lodged in me like glass. I thought of the hospital, the will, the endless cycle of guilt disguised as need. I thought of my mother's letter, her apology that came too late, and realized this was the last unfinished loop. "Where is she?" I asked. Julia blinked, surprised. "Downstairs in the car." I stepped out into the hallway. The air smelled of dust and winter. "She can come up," I said. "You can't." Her face fell, but she nodded. "Okay." 5 minutes later, Julia appeared at the door again, holding Sophia. The child's cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide and curious. She clung to a small stuffed rabbit with one ear nearly torn off. "Hi," I said softly. Sophia looked at me like I was an equation she was still learning to solve. Then she smiled, a small, cautious thing, and held out the rabbit. "For you," she whispered. Something inside me broke, and Mendied at the same time. I took the rabbit, nodded, and said, "Thank you." Julia hovered by the threshold. "She knows who you are," she said. "Mom used to show her pictures, said you were the brave one." That word, brave, hit harder than I expected. Sophia tugged on Julia's sleeve. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Julia looked at me, her face raw. "Could I use your kitchen, just to make her something small?" Every instinct screamed no. But behind her, Sophia's tiny cough shattered whatever resistance I had left. 10 minutes, I said. That's all. Julia nodded quickly, grateful. Inside, she moved carefully, like someone walking through a stranger's home she used to dream about. While she boiled pasta, Sophia sat on my couch drawing circles on a napkin with a blue pen she found in my bag. When Julia finally set a bowl in front of her, she looked up at me and said quietly, "I'm not asking for money. I know that's what you're thinking." I wasn't, I said, though I was. "I just don't know how to be a good mother," she admitted. "Every time I look at her, I hear Mom in my head telling me I'm doing it wrong." I studied her, the same sister who once weaponized pity like currency, now stripped of armor. "Then do it differently," I said. "Stop trying to be Mom, start by not repeating her." She nodded, eyes glassy. "You think it's that easy?" "No," I said, "but it's the only way it works." When Sophia finished eating, she looked at me again. "Can I come here again?" Julia opened her mouth, ready to answer, but I held up a hand. "That depends," I said gently, "on your mom." Julia understood. She wiped her eyes, then stood. "I'll do better," she said. "I hope you do," I replied. They left quietly, the door clicking shut like a period at the end of a long, messy sentence. For a while, I just stood there, holding the stuffed rabbit. It smelled faintly of baby shampoo and something innocent I'd almost forgotten existed. Days passed, then a week. No calls, no letters. Until one morning, an envelope appeared. No handwriting this time, just a child's drawing inside. A stick figure woman holding a smaller hand under a bright orange sun. Beneath it, in wobbly crayon letters, was written, "Thank you, Aunt Em." I pinned it to my fridge, not as forgiveness, not as surrender, but as proof that even in the ruins, something new could grow. Months later, I got a postcard, no return address, just a photo of a playground by the sea. The handwriting was Julia's. "We're moving. New start. She asks about you sometimes. I tell her aunt is brave. Thank you for giving me one last chance to be better." I stared at it for a long time before setting it down. The apartment was quiet, sunlight spilling across the same couch that once carried every echo of anger and grief. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like peace, earned, not borrowed. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and looked out at the city. The world was still loud, messy, unpredictable, but inside my walls it was calm. My mother was gone. My sister was somewhere trying to rebuild. The ghosts were quieter now, not erased, just finally resting. I reached over, touched the little drawing on the fridge, and smiled. Because in the end, maybe that was the whole point. You can't rewrite the past, but you can stop it from writing you. And that, after everything, was enough.